Chair. As you probably both know, I should declare I'm very concerned about this. I think we are witnessing an industrial scale hemorrhaging of value from the UK science and tech landscape. And as Minister raised it at 3 G7s and 2 G20s, this broader issue of research security. I wanted to ask two Ps, principles and policing. So on principles, when I returned to government in October 21, I was told that our policy on research security was as open as possible, as secure as necessary, which I think is a joke. If you ran an airline on the basis of as convenient as possible, as safe as necessary, I wouldn't want to fly on it. And I'm really worried that the scale of the global race, the chase for sovereign advantage, the new Cold War getting pretty hot, it's a whole new landscape, and that we haven't really put in place a suitable principle. So I'd be interested in both of your views on what an adequate principle for the pace of today's global race is. And on policing, to the question we asked in the earlier session, you know, we can have conversations, we can talk about it, but these are pretty here and now urgent dual-use questions. Who should police it? Of course we need to get academics and the security services together, but in the end someone's got to decide. And the academic community has traditionally, rightly, jealously guarded academic freedom from political interference. But it seems to me we're in a new world where, as ministers responsible, as Parliament responsible for 20 billion a year, we have to reassure the public that we're protecting properly. So two questions. Firstly, principles, and then policing. And which other countries are doing this well? And where would you put us on the scale? Are we mid-pack? Are we falling behind, or are we ahead?
Generally speaking, I would say the UK is doing relatively well in this area. We've previously had reference to the Science and Technology Network. There's a number of initiatives, bilateral or with more than one other country, that face pretty similar issues. I mean, you can think of a number of European countries that also have a strong academic sector and need to protect their research. Denmark, Germany, the Netherlands. Through that network, there is a lot of work on collaborative efforts for research security. So I think the UK is definitely in conversation with other countries and trying to identify best practice. I would say it's just not a task that's particularly easy to solve, or one where it's either easy to come up with a catchy principle that I'm afraid I can't deliver on the spot, or to make final assessments on who is policing this. My main message in this context is that I would like to see more national security community influence or warnings in this conversation, a more strategic approach to some of these questions through, prioritizing specific technology areas with a national security backing. But then also perhaps not expecting that one academic in an office somewhere in the basement of a Scottish university can make that assessment for the UK in the absence of a comprehensive China policy and other questions. So I think to put the pressure on an individual researcher to make that call would be the wrong thing to do.
No. James, how would you rate us internationally in this, and who's doing it really well?
I think that the UK faces some sort of acute policy choices more than certain countries. So if you're the US, China, you can sort of afford to do everything. You know, if you're Austria, Slovakia, you can pick 2 or 3 things, get really good at them, and it's very easy to sort of mobilise public-private partnerships around that and whatever. UK is caught in that hinterland. We have it's a nice situation being, depending on what sort of index you look at, but 3rd, 4th, 5th kind of biggest science tech player in the world. That's obviously a good thing. But equally, that does mean we have these, some real challenges there. And I think we have to, thinking to your point about kind of principles, we have to really ask ourselves if we are serious about some of our rhetoric and the scale of the challenge it implies. So if we genuinely want to be a science superpower, as the previous government did, or if we want science to kind of drive growth and the various other missions that this government has, the reality is that that's not just about spending money, etc. It's a wholesale relook at government. Government is a sort of 18th, 19th, 20th century institution that's now trying to deal with 21st century problems, and is just simply not structured in a way that would genuinely deliver on that mission. So I think that means it's looking across both domestic and foreign policy. It's saying obviously it's things that DSIC can do, but it's also the security aspect, it's the talent, it's the infrastructure, the planning, the energy costs, like all these sorts of things, right, that enable the UK to be a competitive part of the tech stack. And we need to recognise we're not going to have sovereign control of most technologies. That's simply not going to happen. But what we can do as a realistic goal, I think, is to say as the third or fourth big player in this, we're going to be an indispensable part of the global tech stack. But we need to recognise where that is and insert ourselves into that, and then cling on. And so that means there are some countries that are very good at that. You know, in the Netherlands with things like lithographic machines, really clear national strategy that we can't do all of AI, but we're going to do this one thing that makes this one thing that makes this one thing that makes AI, and that will make us an indispensable part of the conversation. So I think we can do that. I think that equally we need, in terms of the sorts of principles, it's a tiered approach. Certain technology, it's the sort of own, collaborate, access, you know, we talked about earlier, but it's certain technologies are absolutely going to be driven far more by collaboration, openness, etc. Others it's going to be a much higher fence. I think the final thing I would say is that a competitive advantage and comparative advantage that we have over people like Russia, China, is our allies and our partners. And so that's the other element of this, is we need to be really clear-eyed about how do we get the most for the UK out of those alliances and partnerships, be they militarily, be they governmental, be they business to business, or be they academic.
Thank you.
I believe that the UK has some significant strengths in that ecosystem, but I'm afraid relying on that third position in a number of rankings would be a fallacy from my perspective. It doesn't really matter that much if you're third, fourth, or fifth if the gap to number 2 is so significant. So I think, unlike countries like the Netherlands or Denmark, the UK has not strategically positioned itself in a way that accepts that UK resources are more limited compared to the US or China. If we compare ourselves to other countries, we do look to the US and China, but then the lessons learned from those ecosystems with such vast resources just can't.
I'm intrigued as to whether there is, I don't think there is yet, an index of research security. But my fear is that the UK is very open, hugely collaborative, doesn't police, and is hemorrhaging value, which as a minister responsible for making sure that we're getting public value, and as a committee charged with making sure the government does, I think this is a new landscape for us. James, is there an index? Is there any measurement of?
No, I mean, just no. And one of the challenges is, I think it's compounded by those innovation and commercialization problems we have in this country. So it's not just that the UK, because we are a leader, a relative leader in lots of areas of science, is an attractive destination for those seeking to steal some science. It's also that we are ourselves we are underperforming in terms of turning that new knowledge into obviously tech that we exploit ourselves, commercially, militarily, whatever. So you put those two things together, and it's not just that we perhaps leak scientific knowledge and IP and all these things, but it's also we're not exploiting it ourselves, and that's the other side of the equation, right?
And of course the threat I see it is also acquisition. Some of the companies we cheer ourselves on for having sold, other countries can't believe we've sold it so cheaply, and there are a lot of dark China investment funds that are in disguise. So there's a whole landscape here, not just cyber security.